You're listening to the Vocabbett podcast, where I help students improve their vocabulary for the SAT, ACT, and life itself using my unique and research-backed story-based method. On this podcast, I'm sharing the best tips and tricks for a more enriched vocabulary and pain-free test day. Hello, and welcome to episode 43 of the Vocabbett podcast. I'm Erica Abbott, a former English and history teacher, the author of the young adult novel Ahead of Her Time, and the founder of the eponymously named vocabulary company Vocabbett. Today is another etymology podcast, and we're going to be going over the word cynosure, cynosure. It's definitely a next level SAT word. It's on the more challenging side of all of the lists. So it's a good one to know because it's these types of words that often set you apart from everyone else and help you move into a higher percentile. So cynosure means the center of attention. If someone is the cynosure of the room, they're the person everyone is looking at. You often hear about celebrities being the cynosure of all eyes. The sentence in my dictionary is the queen was the cynosure of all eyes. But if more people were linguists, they might reconsider their phrasing because they're basically calling celebrities and the queen a dog's butt. Cynosure goes back to the Greek kun for dog and ura for tail. So how did dog's tail, it's technically dog's tail, how did dog's tail turn into a word meaning famous or the center of attention? To find the answer to that question, my friends, you will need to look up. Now, I'm not very good at astronomy, but even I have heard of a constellation called the Little Dipper. It looks kind of like a ladle that you'd scoop soup with, but the ancient Greeks thought that it looked like a dog's tail. And within this constellation, the Little Dipper or the dog's tail is the North Star. And in an era before Google Maps, how did you navigate, especially if you were on a ship? With the North Star. The dog's tail was the focus of all eyes. And as the word came into English, its original Greek meaning, dog's tail, started to fade. Instead, the cynosure was far more often associated with the brightest star in the sky, the focus of all eyes. And so now it's absolutely acceptable to describe the queen or a celebrity as a cynosure. You're calling them the brightest star in the sky. But technically, you're also referring to them as a dog's tail. You could just end the story there. But if you're into astronomy, you might have a follow-up question. And you might be like, wait, isn't the Little Dipper Ursa Minor? Isn't that little bear not dog's tail? And you're absolutely right. And there is another story there if you want to hear it. Listen on if you want to know how the dog's tail turned into a little bear, Ursa Minor. This story goes back to mythology, and like 90% of mythological stories, it begins with Zeus's wandering eye. This time around, he fancied a nymph called Callisto. Her name in Greek literally means the most beautiful. But Callisto's more than just a pretty face. She's got a personality. She had sworn off men and decided to be a companion of the goddess Artemis, and the maidens of Artemis basically spent their lives running around the forest, hunting deer, and being feminists before it was cool. So Zeus knows he's not going to get anywhere with the usual sweet talk. There are a lot of versions of this story, so I'm just going to tell you one of the more popular ones. But in this version, Zeus decides to overcome this obstacle by disguising himself as Apollo, Artemis's twin brother, knowing that the girls wouldn't have their guard up around him quite as much as they would around Zeus. Honestly, they probably should. But Apollo can be charming when he wants to be. So he goes in with this like, oh, I'm just family visiting my sister, aren't I such a good guy approach. He spends all this time getting to know Callisto. And after they fall in love, he's like, psych, I'm actually Zeus, not Apollo. And she's like, that's weird, but okay. She gets pregnant and the inevitable happens. Baby's born, Hera and Artemis find out. Now, depending on the version of this story that you read, any one of these gods may have been responsible for what happened next. But one of them is going to turn Callisto into a bear. I personally think it was Artemis, if this story were true, because as a bear, Callisto has to live in the forest, fleeing from hunters, and it's such a uniquely terrible punishment for a former maiden of Artemis to be the hunted instead of the hunter. Callisto's son, on the other hand, has a good life. He grows up to be king of Arcadia, and he's a top-notch hunter to boot. I think you know where I'm going with this. One day, Arcas, the son, goes hunting in the woods where Mom now lives. Mom sees her son for the first time in 20-odd years and is so happy she wants to give him a hug. But Arcas thinks he's about to be attacked by a bear, so he whips out his bow and arrow and is about to take aim when Zeus intervenes. He sends down a bolt of magic and turns Arcas into a little bear, Ursa Minor, so that mom can tell him what's going on and hang out with him. But he needs to get rid of the evidence that he's been meddling with other gods' curses. So he whips them up to the sky and sends them into the constellations to get rid of the evidence. So when Artemis and Hera come knocking, he's like, no, nothing to see here, literally. And these stories go on and on. The next part of it brings it back to that cynosure element, though. Hera knows Zeus is lying. She knows Zeus intervened and freed Callisto from her punishment. Hera and Artemis were probably in on the original punishment together. If Artemis hadn't taken care of it, Hera totally would have. And she wants to make sure that Callisto and Arcus don't escape their punishment just because they're in the sky. One of the unique traits of these constellations is that they don't rise and set. They stay at the top of the sky. Other constellations kind of move around more. This is why they're so great for navigating, why they're the center of so many people's attention, or they used to be. But what made them the cynosure was also part of Hera's punishment. She didn't want Callisto and Arcus to be free, to be able to run around the sky and hang out with the other stars. So after Zeus swirls them up into the sky to save them, Hera traps them there. They can't run around. They can't set into the sea and get a drink of water. They're trapped. Hera is a total psycho. This is the same reason that the Romans wouldn't touch her sacred geese when they were starving to death against the Gauls. I shared that story in the Money episode a few episodes back. But isn't it just insane how many stories are hiding in one little word, cynosure? There's love and jealousy and best friends turning each other into animals and sailors navigating home and celebrities being the center of attention. By the way, you're usually the cynosure of something. The cynosure of the art world, the cynosure of the tabloids, the cynosure of the room. You get my drift. Now, I personally don't speak Greek, but oftentimes with these roots, so many of them have drifted into English that even if you don't speak Greek or Latin, there are enough connections that just knowing the etymology is really helpful. But there aren't a lot of other dog and tail derivatives in English. So I found it helpful to have kind of a secondary memory trick for this word. I look at the word cynosure and I see the C at the beginning and I think celebrity. And then I see the sure and I think everyone's sure looking at that celebrity. I know it's stupid. Come up with one that works for you. But whatever you come up with, knowing the backstory of this word will give it a lot more weight in your brain. It'll help it stick. To continue painlessly improving your vocabulary and English skills, be sure to check out the Vocabbett membership at vocabbett.com. You get a wealth of vocabulary boosting material, and I add new material to it twice a week. Thank you so much, and I will see you next week.